Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and today we're back with another video, and we're going to be talking about the 4 free characters that we can get for the current event in version 2.0. Who is actually the better choice? I know a lot of you might think these two are like free characters, Asta and Yukong. You obviously will get the gacha 4 stars, right? Which is like Guinaifen and Sampo. That is not always true. I'll be telling you like the key eidolons for each of them, which one to look out for, especially if you maybe already have all 4. If you have 3 out of 4, sometimes it might be better to choose one of them, especially if you hit like a key eidolon threshold that one of the character has where they become like so much stronger. So let's first start off with something very easy and probably gonna be a lot of people. If you pull for Black Swan or Imbibitor Lunae, your 2 choices are the easier one, Imbibitor Lunae. Of course, Yukong likely will be the ideal choice. If you pull for Imbibitor Lunae, you skip Black Swan. Yukong at higher eidolons works very well, especially if you have her all your skill points requirements for Imbibitor Lunae set. Yukong is going to be the ideal. We'll go more into like the key eidolons to look for. But whereas Black Swan is the tricky one, theoretically speaking, Asta will be the most versatile for Black Swan, but Asta is a free character and she doesn't scale super well with eidolons compared to like getting new characters like Guinaifen and Sampo. So Black Swan, we will talk about them in a bit because each of them have certain thresholds of eidolons that are important to watch out for. Let's start off first with Asta, who's going to be the most easiest out of all of them to explain. Let me just pull up the screen here. I have Asta at, on my account it's like E6. I've used her for quite a bit already. In my opinion, we can just go through all of them and I'll tell you like the one that I think is the key one to reach out for. And as we go along, I'll also like mention critical ones to take note of. First, E1, when using skill, deals damage for 1 extra time to a random enemy. Note that Asta, of course, is a free character, so you start off already with E0. So choosing this one will mean you are guaranteeing at least an E1. Personally, I don't really think E1 is like super strong. It is nice, it's a good addition, but I don't think it's like one character's worth. For E2, after using her ultimate, Asta's charging stacks will not be reduced in the next turn. This is pretty nice, especially since Asta does burst very often. I think E2 is like pretty good. So E1, like maybe I'll call it maybe an A- tier, whereas for E2, I'll probably put it at like an A tier, which is quite useful because it allows her uptime on her buff to be much higher as well. Don't have to use so much skill points to maintain the stacks. E4 is when it gets really good. Aurora bars in Beauty and Bliss. Asta's energy regeneration rate increases by 15% when she has 2 or more charging stacks. Generally is the case, she will usually be at 2 stacks or higher, and 15% energy restoration is insanely high, considering that her ultimate burst cost is only 120. And at the same time, you can of course equip her with other energy restoration stuff in her overall kit. Super good in my opinion. But let's go back to the eidolons. I think E4 is probably like S- or S tier. I think it's probably her best eidolon so far. And last but not least, of course, charging stacks lost in each turn is reduced by 1 in E6. E6 is like okay, but I think the key one that makes a difference in Asta's overall playstyle is E4. I would say this is the critical one. Other than that, Asta is one of those characters which has a relatively stable and linear progression through her eidolons, so nothing very critically that makes or breaks a character, in my opinion at least. Asta is probably going to be a safe pick for most people since she is a harmony character, fire character, scaling with speed, works in DOT teams and others alike. Generally quite a safe bet for most people. Next up, another harmony character. Since we talked about one for Asta, let's talk about the other harmony character that a lot of people might be thinking of. Harmony is of course very interesting because they are so universal, right? You can use them for so many different characters to buff them as well. Yukong is a very strong character. Most of you might know she's a free character as well, similar to Asta. The one big downside about her is she requires a lot of 1 speed tuning. You have to play her on manual as well, and you have to be very mindful when you use her uptime on Roaring Bowstring. So that might put some newer players off a little bit because it's not so easy to use this character, especially at low eidolons. But unlike Asta, who scales linearly, Yukong scales like very much, like quadratically in a sense, to use for lack of better word. Towards the E6, you will realize that it pumps up very quickly later on. So let's start first with E1, since this is the one that you will guarantee to get if you pick her from this banner. She's a free character, of course, so E0 is like more or less guaranteed. At the start of battle, increase speed of all allies by 10% for 2 turns. This is like a okay-ish. I mean, it's good for the pure fiction event because it's so short. But other than that, I don't think it is a big game changer. Probably a B+ in my opinion, E1. Not really a huge game changer. As you can see, it starts off very muted. Next up, E2, Skyward Command. When allies' current energy is equal to its energy limit, Yukong regenerates an additional 5 energy. Which means that if your ally's energy is at its full buff, that means it's like maxed out. This of course can only be triggered once for each ally. The trigger count is reset after Yukong uses her ultimate. So this means is when their energy reaches the max, the 3 other guys on your team, she gets back like some energy refund, up to like 15 for each ally each time she uses her ult. Her burst cost here is 130, slightly higher than Asta, and she does like to keep spamming her skill, so that's something to note. I would say this is not bad. It's still energy refund, more or less, but I'll probably put it somewhere like A+. You're definitely very useful for her, especially helping her get the uptime on her burst much quicker. For E4, when Roaring Bowstrings is active, Yukong deals 30% more damage to enemies. This is like more individualistic in a sense. So 1, 2, and 4 so far, I think 2 is the best out of all of them. 2 will be a pretty good like camping spot for a while, but where she really gets like super strong is E6. When Yukong uses her ultimate, she immediately gains 1 stack of Roaring Bowstring. This might seem very small, like oh, it's just 1 stack, but what this actually allows you is you can hold off her burst. Like let's say you have her ultimate burst already fully charged up for Yukong. You can wait until your DPS is like Dr. Ratio for example is about to attack. Then you use Yukong's ult, so you get that stack up of Roaring Bowstring and immediately Dr. Ratio goes after. It helps you control the buff a little bit better, so your supports who don't need the Roaring Bowstring, you can just like leave it chill, and then when you want your DPS to go, then you use Yukong. Very strong. I think E6 is definitely by far her best, and it changes her playstyle quite significantly as well. Other than that, I think E2 is a pretty nice camping spot, especially if you just want to get a bit more refund for using this character a bit better as well. Just want to give a very quick additional information. Most big PP damage dealers you'll see on YouTube and all of the other content creators who have like E6 of most of the characters, Yukong is one of the gatekeepers in order for you to get like 1 turn clears, big PP damage, because the amount of buffs that she gives is ridiculously large. You can see here it's like 65% crit damage and 28% crit rate on top of like attack buffs and imaginary buffs. Is ridiculously a lot of utility, excluding like even other stuff that you use like Harmony Light Cone, relic sets and whatnot. Very strong character, especially at E6. If you have her at E6, your Doctor ratio is like super stacked. So for any of you who have him, I think Yukong works pretty well as well, especially at high eidolons. But now let's go to the last 2 characters. We will talk about Sampo first, since he's a slightly older character, so some of you might have already some eidolons here and there, and then we will talk about Guinaifen towards the end. So if you are Black Swan main, Sampo is not totally useless because he can still stack Wind Shear and it also combines very well with Black Swan. His ultimate here increases the DOT that enemies takes, which means that he pairs very nicely if you don't have like Kafka in a Sampo Black Swan team, or you can even run like Kafka, Black Swan, Sampo if you don't care about the Harmony in the 3rd slot. But I still think like Harmony in the 3rd slot is quite good as well if you already have Kafka as well as Black Swan. So Sampo, let's look at his eidolons. Rising Love, when using skill, deals damage for 1 extra time to a random enemy. This is nice, it like bounces 1 more time. Similar to Asta's one, it's not like super significant, probably like A-. It's good to have, not like critical or anything. Infectious Enthusiasm, defeating an enemy with Wind Shear has a 100% base chance of inflicting all enemies with 1 stack of Wind Shear, equivalent to the Talon's Wind Shear. I think this is like so as well, like probably quite similar to Rising Love. It's also A- tier. It's nice to have, but not very critical. So as you can see, like Sampo's earlier eidolons are not like super game breaking for him. E4, when skill hits an enemy with 5 or more stacks of Wind Shear, enemy immediately takes 8% of current Wind Shear damage. This is quite interesting because it's like this procs immediately some Wind Shear when you're using his skill, which might be nice. It's like a pseudo Kafka where you're trying to like pop a bit of damage instantly. So E4 probably is like, out of the 1, 2, 3 is my most, the one that interests me the most. But E6 here, Talon Wind Shear multiplier increases by 15%. I think it's very interesting. Some of you might be seeing, oh, this is just 15% Wind Shear damage. It's not too much, right? So if we go over here to the Talon passive here, you can see that they have a 65% base chance to inflict Wind Shear, and enemy takes like 40% of Sampo's attack. This of course goes up slightly higher. I have him quite low, so I think that at level 10 or so, it probably goes up to like 50-60%. So that's like a 25% increase in damage over here, which is quite nice because it's basically increases the amount of wind shear damage that you take. And note that it stacks, so that 15% here basically stacks up to 5 times, so it's like a 65% attack multiplier increase, which is nice considering that every single enemy can get this additional damage. So it's a straight up damage buff. Out of all of them, probably I would say, I think that E4 might make him a more interesting utility character for popping the wind shear ASAP, but E6 is more stable. I would say that E4, E6 probably will be my go-to ones that I'm interested in if I'm playing this particular character. E1 and E2 are really like nice to haves. And that's for Sampo. So we talked about how he works with like Guinaifen, Black Swan and Kafka, but now let's talk about the last one here, Guinaifen. I have her at also E6. She is why people will play Guinaifen and Sampo? Maybe I can just elaborate on that. People will play Sampo. He's a very strong character because he buffs DOT damage. He's like a supportive unit that also adds a lot of wind shear, has some like self-refund here, 10 energy as you can see, with good amounts of energy cost of 120. So his burst comes back relatively quickly if you're using the skill, and you can choose to when to use his skill because the wind shear lasts for a decent amount of time. Guinaifen on the other hand is increasing damage similar to Sampo in her burn, this like fire kiss over here. So it increases the amount of damage the enemies take by 7% here. Excellent if you're playing outside of DOT teams. Sampo, if you realize like he's out here, only buffs DOT damage taken, whereas Guinaifen is like pretty much damage received is increased by more amount, which is generally much more versatile. So that's like the difference between Guinaifen and Sampo. She does rely a lot on her fire kiss ability, and her ult is also 120, similar to Sampo. So with that quick narration, let's talk about her eidolons now. Slurping Noodle during handstand, when skill is used, there's a 100% base chance to reduce the attacked target enemy's effect rest by 10% for 2 turns. This is very solid. Like most nihility characters would like this in some way or another. It means you just need less effect hit rate on your characters. It's basically free stats because you're lowering enemy resistances as well. One thing to note, of course, against enemies with very, very high effect rest, this might be not very useful since it's just a probability thing, but it's still more useful than a lot of stuff, especially since it's a more supportive effect that you can run her as. Next up, E2. When an enemy target is being burned, the damage multiplier of the burn status applied by her basic or skill increases by 40%. This is like so-so, it's more of like focusing on her damage ability, which if any of you are relying on her for purely damage, perhaps you are still looking for more damage dealing main characters on your team. And the reason why, of course, I'm talking about these characters like Sampo and Guinaifen in the E0 sense is because I also want you guys to know, because some of you might be picking them up for the first time. You want to know like what value they bring for your account as well. And of course, if you're finding value in this video so far, do give it a like, subscribe for more of such future content. I try to think of whatever ways I can help you guys, and any questions that you have on Discord when you guys ask me questions as well. I try to like make videos so that I can answer as many questions as I can. So stay tuned for that on the channel as well. Now E4. Blocking Pike with Neck. Every time the burn status inflicted by Guinaifen causes damage, Guinaifen regenerates 2 energy. This is super good. It gives her even more refund on a 120 burst cost character. Let's say there's like 5 enemies on the field, you regenerate like 10 enemies if you inflict burn on all of them. So 2 turns you get 20 energy back. It's an insane good amount of like cash back for energy. So I think E4 is like super good. 1-4 so far are stuff that I really like. And E6, of course, increases the stackable Fire Kiss count by 1. This is very strong because Fire Kiss over here, you can see, stacks up to 3 on the base E0, which increases the damage by about 21%. But if you increase that again, it becomes 28%, which is very huge in terms of the damage buff, since all your other characters benefit from. So E1 is supportive. E6 is supportive, E2 is in a sense like supportive and damage dealing as well. So 1, 6, 4, all very solid. Of course, going all the way to 6 is very strong for this particular unit. If you like her design, you play her a lot, very strong. E2 is the one that matters the least in my opinion, because of course it doesn't do too much other than her own individual damage as well. And if you guys appreciate such content, we already have guide videos. For example, if you're looking to pull on the banner characters now, like for example Black Swan or maybe even Imbibiter Lune, we have tons of content on the channel. Check it out, and thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next video.